In a small suburban neighborhood, life appeared picture-perfect for Jonathan and Emily Carter. They were a couple admired by neighbors, friends, and family for their seemingly unshakable bond. Married for over 15 years, they had built a life together full of shared dreams, raising 2 children and thriving in a community where everyone knew their name. Jonathan, a firefighter, was the town's quiet hero, risking his life daily for others. Emily, a church secretary, was known for her charm and grace, always involved in community activities and charity events. But beneath the surface of their idyllic life, Jonathan began to sense something was amiss. Emily's behavior had changed, subtle at first, but unmistakable over time. She would often come home late from work meetings or text incessantly, smiling at her phone with a secretive air. She seemed more distant, emotionally detached, and overly defensive whenever Jonathan asked about her day. One evening, Jonathan returned home earlier than usual after a long and exhausting shift at the fire station. The smell of her favorite perfume filled the air, but Emily wasn't home. A sense of unease began to creep in. Checking the kitchen counter, he noticed her phone was left unlocked, a rarity for her. Against his better judgment, he glanced at the screen and saw a message that made his heart sink. "I can't wait to see you again. Monday night can't come soon enough." Jonathan's world started to unravel. His mind raced with questions. Who was she texting? How long had this been going on? Was it just a fling, or something deeper? Determined to uncover the truth, Jonathan decided to follow his instincts. Over the weekend, he meticulously planned to track Emily's movements. He knew it wouldn't be easy, but he needed answers. With a heavy heart, he began piecing together the puzzle that would soon shatter the illusion of his marriage. On Monday evening, Jonathan's plan came into motion. He had taken the day off, claiming he needed rest from a grueling fire station shift. In reality, he had equipped his car with a discreet GPS tracker linked to Emily's vehicle, ensuring he could follow her movements without being noticed. Emily left the house at 6:30 p.m., dressed far more elegantly than usual for what she had called a late church meeting. Jonathan's chest tightened as he watched her drive away. He waited a few minutes before following her at a safe distance, ensuring she wouldn't suspect anything. The GPS tracker pinged as Emily's car turned toward the outskirts of town. Jonathan's stomach churned as the location became clear: the parking lot of a boutique hotel known for its private clientele. He parked a few blocks away and walked cautiously, his firefighter instincts guiding his every move. From the shadows, Jonathan watched Emily exit her car, smoothing down her dress nervously. A man emerged from the hotel lobby, a face Jonathan immediately recognized. It was Pastor Michael, the trusted leader of their church, and a figure held in high regard by the community. Jonathan's heart sank as the two embraced warmly, their laughter echoing in the quiet evening air. As they entered the hotel, Jonathan's shock gave way to a seething rage. He felt a mix of betrayal and humiliation, knowing the man his wife was cheating with was someone who had preached about faithfulness and morality from the pulpit. Jonathan forced himself to stay calm, knowing an impulsive confrontation wouldn't give him the answers he needed. Instead, he returned to his car and began recording his thoughts on his phone, using the raw emotions of the moment to process the enormity of what he had just witnessed. But this wasn't enough for him. He needed undeniable evidence, not just for himself, but to expose the lies Emily and Pastor Michael had woven. Over the next few days, Jonathan set up hidden cameras and microphones in Emily's car and their home office, waiting for the right moment to catch their conversations. The hardest part was pretending everything was fine, while his trust in Emily crumbled. Each time she smiled at him or hugged their children, he felt a pang of anger and grief. Then, late one evening, his patience paid off. Listening to a recording, Jonathan heard Emily and Pastor Michael discussing their secret meetings and their next plan to spend an entire weekend together. Jonathan's hands trembled as he listened, the reality of their betrayal cutting deeper than he ever imagined. Jonathan now had the evidence he needed, but instead of confronting Emily immediately, he began to devise a plan, one that would ensure they couldn't hide their deceit any longer. The betrayal wouldn't just stay within the walls of his home. The world would see the truth. The week following Jonathan's discovery felt like an eternity. Every interaction with Emily was a facade, his simmering anger masked by forced calm. The betrayal weighed heavily on him, but what came next would upend their lives in ways none of them could have anticipated. It was a cold Friday night when Jonathan received an emergency call from the fire station. A blaze had broken out at a local community center, the very church where Emily worked. As a firefighter, Jonathan had faced countless life-threatening situations, but this one felt personal. Racing to the scene, he saw flames engulfing the building, their orange glow lighting up the night sky. Church members and bystanders stood outside in shock, some sobbing and others shouting prayers. Jonathan scanned the crowd for Emily, but she was nowhere to be seen. "Emily's inside!" someone screamed. His heart stopped. Without hesitation, Jonathan grabbed his gear and charged into the burning structure, his instincts overriding the emotional turmoil. Inside, the heat was unbearable, and thick smoke filled the air. Navigating through collapsing beams and searing flames, Jonathan searched frantically. He finally found Emily huddled in the corner of her office, coughing violently and barely conscious. Beside her, to his disgust, was Pastor Michael, who appeared dazed and injured. Jonathan hesitated for a split second, anger and betrayal flashing through his mind. But his sense of duty took over. He hoisted both of them over his shoulders and made his way out, the roaring fire threatening to trap them at every turn. When they finally emerged from the flames, the crowd erupted in cheers. Paramedics rushed to tend to Emily and Pastor Michael, while Jonathan stood silently, his soot-covered face betraying no emotion. Despite saving their lives, his inner turmoil remained unresolved. As Emily was loaded into the ambulance, their eyes met briefly. Jonathan could see the guilt and fear in her expression, but he couldn't bring himself to speak. He turned away, knowing that the fire had not only scarred the church, but also ignited something deeper within him, a determination to expose the truth. Later that night, as Jonathan sat alone in their living room, the weight of everything crashed down on him. He realized the fire had been a metaphorical turning point. Just as the flames had consumed the church, the lies and deceit in his marriage had burned away any remnants of trust. Jonathan made up his mind. The time for silence was over. He would reveal everything, and the consequences would be theirs to face. The fire at the church had left the community in disarray. Pastor Michael was praised for surviving the ordeal, while Emily's colleagues rallied around her, oblivious to the darker truths hidden beneath the surface. But Jonathan knew the time had come to expose their betrayal, and he was determined to make the revelation unforgettable. Sitting in his study, Jonathan reviewed the evidence he had collected, audio recordings, messages, and video clips that painted a damning picture of Emily's affair with Pastor Michael. Every word and action he documented fueled his resolve. Yet, exposing the truth to a select few wasn't enough. He wanted the world to see the reality of their lies. Jonathan's experience as a firefighter gave him a technical edge. He spent hours setting up a foolproof live streaming system, complete with hidden cameras and a secure broadcast link. His plan was simple, yet devastating. During the halftime break of a Monday night football game, a time when millions tuned in, he would hijack the broadcast and stream the incriminating footage. The idea was bold, and the consequences weighed heavily on him. Jonathan wasn't the type to seek revenge, but this wasn't just about him anymore. It was about the betrayal of trust, the hypocrisy of a religious leader, and the public facade Emily and Pastor Michael maintained. As the day approached, Jonathan rehearsed every step of his plan. He tested the equipment, ensuring no technical glitches could interfere. He remained calm around Emily, acting as if nothing was amiss, though her occasional furtive glances told him she sensed something was off. On the day of the live stream, Jonathan arrived at the fire station as usual, but left early, claiming he had a personal errand. In reality, he was setting up the final piece of his plan at the TV station, where he had once volunteered as a technician. Leveraging old connections, he gained access to the control room and subtly integrated his stream into the live feed without arousing suspicion. That evening, as millions across the country settled in to watch the game, Jonathan sat in his car outside the station, his finger hovering over the trigger to start the stream. His heart pounded, not from fear, but from the weight of what he was about to do. He thought about his children, the life he had built, and the trust that had been shattered. When the halftime whistle blew, Jonathan took a deep breath and activated the stream. Across the country, televisions switched from the expected analysis of the game to the footage showed Emily and Pastor Michael in their most private moments, texts, audio confessions, and hidden camera footage that left no doubt about their affair. Gasps echoed in living rooms, bars, and public spaces. Social media exploded with reactions, hashtags trending within minutes. Jonathan's phone buzzed incessantly with calls and messages, but he ignored them all, focusing instead on the catharsis of exposing the truth. Inside the motel room, where Emily and Pastor Michael had once again met in secret, their phones lit up with notifications. When Emily opened hers and saw the footage playing on a live stream, her face turned pale. "Oh my God," she whispered, her voice trembling. Jonathan watched from a distance as the fallout began, knowing there was no turning back. The live stream changed everything. Within minutes of Jonathan's broadcast, phones buzzed and screens across the country lit up with footage no one expected to see. Families watching Monday Night Football froze in shock as the halftime analysis was replaced by Emily and Pastor Michael's betrayal on full display. Private texts, intimate moments, and undeniable evidence of their affair. Emily was at the motel with Michael when the stream aired. As her phone started to buzz uncontrollably, she ignored it at first, thinking it was unrelated. But when Michael's phone also began to ring, he glanced at it and froze. "Turn on the TV," he stammered, his voice barely above a whisper. Emily grabbed her phone and saw the live feed. Her face turned pale as the weight of the exposure hit her. "Oh no, this can't be happening," she muttered, trembling as she watched herself on the screen. The motel room descended into chaos. Michael scrambled to switch off the TV, but it was too late. The damage was done. Outside, reporters were already beginning to gather, tipped off by the viral broadcast. Jonathan, sitting in his car outside the TV station, knew his plan had worked. His heart was heavy, but there was a strange sense of justice in watching the world uncover the lies that had shattered his life. He drove home in silence, the sound of his tires on the pavement, the only thing grounding him in that moment. At home, Emily returned late that night. She stood in the doorway, her makeup smudged and eyes swollen from crying. She barely looked like the confident, poised woman Jonathan once knew. "How could you?" she whispered, her voice breaking as she stepped inside. Jonathan stood from the couch and faced her. "How could I? No, Emily. How could you? I gave you everything, my love, my trust, my loyalty, and you threw it all away for what? Him?" Emily tried to speak, but her words faltered. I didn't mean for it to go this far." Jonathan's laugh was cold and hollow. "Didn't mean for it to go this far? You've been lying to me, to our family, and to everyone who ever trusted you. Don't stand here and pretend you're the victim." Tears streamed down Emily's face as she collapsed onto the couch. "You've ruined me," she said quietly. Jonathan's voice was steady, but his eyes burned with intensity. "No, Emily, you ruined yourself. I just showed the world who you really are." Meanwhile, Pastor Michael's world fell apart even faster. By the next morning, the church council had removed him from his position, and his wife filed for divorce. His reputation, once untouchable, was now irreparably damaged, and the community that had once respected him now avoided him entirely. Jonathan knew the fallout wasn't just for Emily and Michael, it was for him too. His actions, though justified in his mind, came with consequences. He had crossed a line that couldn't be uncrossed, and the path forward was uncertain. But as he sat alone in the quiet of his home, he felt a small glimmer of relief. The truth was out, and the burden of secrecy was gone. In the days following the live stream, Jonathan's life became a whirlwind of attention, criticism, and unexpected solitude. The community that once admired him as a firefighter now regarded him with a mix of sympathy and caution. Some praised him for exposing the truth, while others questioned the morality of his methods. Emily moved out of the house, unable to face the shame and judgment that followed her everywhere. The children, though supportive of their father, were deeply affected by the public fallout. Jonathan worked hard to shield them from the worst of it, reassuring them that they would rebuild their lives together, no matter how broken things seemed. At the fire station, Jonathan faced inquiries from his superiors about the legality and ethics of his live streaming stunt. Though he wasn't immediately dismissed, his actions raised concerns about the integrity expected of someone in his position. He was placed on indefinite leave while an internal review took place. For Pastor Michael, the consequences were even more severe. His wife's divorce case moved swiftly, with the evidence from the live stream leaving no room for denial. Stripped of his position at the church and shunned by the community, Michael was forced to leave town. His name became synonymous with disgrace, a once revered figure reduced to a cautionary tale of hypocrisy and betrayal. Jonathan, meanwhile, found himself in a strange limbo. The house felt emptier without Emily, but it was also quieter, a peace he hadn't realized he needed. He spent his days organizing the mess of his personal life, meeting with lawyers to finalize the divorce, managing the children's schedules, and seeking therapy to process the pain of betrayal. One evening, as he sat on the back porch with a cup of coffee, Jonathan reflected on the choices he had made. The live stream had been a moment of impulsive vengeance, but it had also been cathartic. For the first time in months, he felt a sense of closure, even if it came at a steep price. Emily reached out once, asking for a meeting to talk. Reluctantly, Jonathan agreed, wanting to hear what she had to say, not out of hope, but for clarity. They met at a quiet cafe, where Emily appeared nervous and worn. "I'm sorry," she began, her voice trembling. "I know I've hurt you and the kids. I don't know if you'll ever forgive me, but I need you to know that I regret everything." Jonathan looked at her, his expression calm but distant. "Regret doesn't change what happened, Emily. You made your choices, and now we're both living with the consequences. I don't hate you, but I can't forgive you either. Not yet, and maybe not ever." Emily nodded, tears welling in her eyes. "I understand. I hope one day you can find peace." Jonathan stood, placing cash on the table. "I'm trying, for myself and for the kids. That's all that matters now." As he walked away, Jonathan felt a weight lift from his shoulders. The meeting hadn't brought closure in the way he'd expected, but it had solidified his resolve to move forward. The road ahead would be long, but he was determined to rebuild, not just for himself, but for his children, who deserved a father they could be proud of. Months passed since the live stream that had changed Jonathan's life forever. The initial storm of media frenzy and public scrutiny had settled, but the scars remained. Jonathan had chosen to embrace the challenge of rebuilding his life, finding purpose in his work, and most importantly, in being the father his children needed. He focused on being present, prioritizing their needs, and working through the pain of betrayal. The fire station, once a place of camaraderie and pride, had become a reminder of the public fallout. Jonathan had been placed on leave indefinitely, but he still visited the station regularly to check in with his colleagues. Despite the whispers and sideways glances, some had been understanding, while others maintained a sense of distance. The support from his fellow firefighters had been a mixed bag, but Jonathan held his head high, determined to prove that his worth went beyond the scandal. His therapy sessions had become a vital part of his healing process. Each week, he sat in front of a compassionate therapist, unpacking his emotions, learning how to navigate the resentment he felt toward Emily, and confronting the guilt he carried for exposing his personal life in such a public way. But the therapy was also helping him see a future beyond the pain, a future where he could still thrive. Jonathan's children, Emma and Noah, had adjusted to the new normal. They had good days and bad days, but with Jonathan's unwavering support, they began to heal. Jonathan ensured they stayed connected with their friends, enrolled them in activities that helped them cope, and made sure they understood that their mother's actions weren't a reflection of their own worth. Meanwhile, Emily's life had taken a different trajectory. After the divorce, she moved to a smaller town to start over, away from the prying eyes of the community. She had begun therapy as well, seeking to understand her own motivations and the deep-seated issues that led her to betray her family. But despite her regrets, the damage was done, and she couldn't escape the shame that followed her wherever she went. Emily's attempts to reach out to her children were met with silence, as they still struggled with the betrayal. Jonathan received a call one afternoon that would change the course of his journey. The fire station was offering him an opportunity to return to work. It wasn't the same position he had before, and it came with a lot of conditions, including a probationary period. But the offer itself was a sign of faith in his abilities, something Jonathan hadn't expected but was grateful for. Returning to work wasn't easy. His colleagues treated him differently, and every day was a test of his resilience. Some respected his dedication, while others still viewed him as a cautionary tale. But Jonathan kept his focus on the job, knowing that his actions, both in his personal life and at the station, would define his future. One evening, while working on a fire safety initiative, Jonathan was approached by Captain Lopez, a seasoned firefighter who had been supportive throughout the aftermath of the live stream. "You've done well, Jonathan," Captain Lopez said, his voice steady. "We've all made mistakes in our lives. It's not about how you fall, but how you rise. You've risen, and it's clear you've earned your place here." Jonathan looked at the captain, nodding in appreciation. "Thank you. I'm not perfect, but I'm trying to be better every day." The recognition from his peers, even if it was small, meant the world to Jonathan. It reaffirmed his belief that redemption wasn't just a destination. It was a journey that required strength, humility, and a willingness to grow from the ashes of his past. As the months went on, Jonathan found a renewed sense of purpose, not just as a firefighter, but as a father and a man who had learned to live with his mistakes. The road to redemption was long, but it was also filled with moments of hope and progress. And with each step forward, Jonathan realized that healing wasn't about erasing the past. It was about learning to live with it and still move toward a brighter future. It had been over a year since the live stream that had rocked Jonathan's world. The intense media storm had calmed, and the community had moved on, as it always did. Jonathan, however, had learned that the true healing process was one of constant effort. While the wounds of betrayal would always remain, they no longer defined him. He had learned to live with them, finding new strength in the face of adversity. Jonathan's relationship with his children had grown stronger than ever. Emma and Noah were thriving, each in their own way, and Jonathan had created a home environment that was filled with stability and love. The house, once empty and filled with painful memories of Emily, now had new life, and the sound of laughter often echoed through the rooms. They had found their rhythm, and Jonathan had found peace in being the kind of father his children deserved. Though Jonathan's relationship with Emily remained distant, there were moments of understanding. Emily had started to rebuild her life, though the shadows of her past decisions lingered over her. She had reached out a few times, sending occasional texts, asking how the kids were doing. But Jonathan kept the communication strictly about their well-being. He had forgiven her in his own way, but trust was a long way off. The fire station had become a place of renewal for Jonathan. He had fully returned to his role, and while not everyone was as accepting as Captain Lopez, he had earned the respect of most. The firehouse was more than just a job. It was a second family to Jonathan, and with every life he saved, every fire he fought, and every person he helped, he felt like he was slowly rebuilding himself from the inside out. Then came the day when Jonathan received an unexpected letter. It was from the community group that had initially criticized him for his actions. They had seen the change in him, the genuine effort he had made to better himself. The letter extended an invitation to Jonathan to speak at an upcoming event about the importance of accountability, redemption, and the impact of one's choices. At first, Jonathan was hesitant. He had never seen himself as someone to speak publicly about his personal struggles, let alone be invited to do so in front of others. But after a long conversation with his therapist and his children, he realized that this was an opportunity to turn his past mistakes into something meaningful. On the day of the event, Jonathan stood before a crowd of people who had once judged him, his heart pounding in his chest. He began by acknowledging his mistakes, taking full responsibility for the pain he had caused. He spoke honestly about the turmoil he had felt, the impulsiveness of his decisions, and the long, painful process of healing. "I've learned," Jonathan said, his voice steady, "that redemption isn't about erasing what you've done. It's about learning from it, taking responsibility, and doing the hard work to be a better person. For me, it was about learning to be a better father, a better firefighter, and most importantly, a better man." The crowd listened in rapt attention. Some faces remained skeptical, but others nodded, clearly moved by Jonathan's words. It was a moment of catharsis for him, a final step toward truly letting go of the past and embracing the future.